Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Fantasy football teachers here. We educate you, dominate the NFL. Yeah, we're not even at the Super Bowl just yet, but we're already seeing offseason moves. Big trade, Jared Goff going to the Detroit Lions along with a couple of firsts and a third in exchange for Matthew Stafford. Ben Fisher, how are you holding up, man? Are you a Rams fan now? Is that what's going to happen now that your guy, Matthew Stafford, is in LA?
I am a Stafford fan through and through. I did not pound that Super Bowl future. I think it's dropped to like 10 or 11 to 1 from like 18 to 1. But listen, I'm all in. Go Rams. I will be rooting for Stafford. I'm still Lions homer, but they're going to be like 0 and 5 very quickly. You know what? I'm happy for Stafford to get out of Detroit. He obviously wanted out. He went to a good team. I saw reports today that he just didn't want to go. The only place he didn't want to go was New
Yeah.
England, which just makes me laugh even louder because Matt Patricia's back there.
Warms my heart.
Uh, Warms my heart that he hates Matt Patricia because Stafford has done a lot for the city of Detroit. I think he's just beloved by the city. His wife was always there doing charity work, and they did a lot of work for the city of Detroit. So I don't think there's an angry soul at him. He wanted out. Nobody can blame him. Best of luck from me as a Lions fan to him. I hope he gets a shot at winning a playoff game and hopefully a Super Bowl one time.
Yeah, that could be in the cards for the Rays, especially if their defense holds up the way it did this season. Joining us also, we've got Kyle Olson. Guys, this is a big trade for fantasy football already, right? I mean, there's a lot to break down here. Let's start off with the Rams. Olson, let's just start with you. What do you think this is going to do to this Rams offense, which was not so pretty this last season?
Right. Well, obviously you gotta look at with McVay there, and he's got Stafford coming in. You got to think that it's going to be an uptick for those receivers, right? So Cooper Kupp, obviously Robert Woods. I think they're moving up your board a little bit. It's definitely exciting for those Rams players, those Rams fantasy receivers, to see them get a guy like Stafford. Now they've got a guy that has proven that he can play, he can throw the ball, he can put up fantasy numbers. I think there's still a lot of unknowns. We talked about before, you guys and I talked about the defense of the Rams is really good defense. So how much do they need to throw the ball? But I think just going from Goff to Stafford, that's a huge upgrade. And so now you've got a guy that McVay can trust throwing the ball. Hopefully he's going to come up there and spread the ball around. So I think you're moving Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods up, and Van Jefferson up in your rankings. And then my other thing that I'm kind of wondering about too, I was looking at some rankings for where Stafford was on January 4th. So obviously before this trade happened, and they had him, depending on the site, anywhere from like 15th to 20th. So one thing I want to hear from you guys too is like how far you think this moves him up in the quarterback rankings. Does he move how far up into that QB1 range? Is he borderline? With kind of the unknown. So I kind of want to hear what you guys have to say about that, but definitely exciting for those Rams receivers. As far as how does it affect Cam Akers, we'll see. Again, it kind of depends on how much do they need to throw the ball. But I think just having a better offense overall can still bode well for Akers, even if they are throwing the ball more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think 15 to 20. I mean, obviously, I think Stafford could pretty much fall within the 12 to 15 range fantasy wise. So I think that 15, even after the trade, is there. He doesn't need to be a gunslinger going to the Rams, right? Like they made the playoffs with Jared Goff. Wolford was playing. They have a solid defense, arguably one of the best in the league, if not the best. He doesn't need to just sit there and chuck the ball. So it isn't like, okay, let's just put this to bed. Like Stafford is an upgrade over Goff. Like I've seen on Twitter, like somebody was texting me like, oh, it's an equal trade and the Lions got two first. Nope.
No.
Stafford is better than Jared Goff. Let's just put that to bed right now. Now, is it will Stafford be putting up fantasy numbers that we saw him with Megatron? No. Like they have Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. ADOT this year was less than 7 yards for both of those receivers. Stafford they don't have that true deep threat. Maybe Van Jefferson turns into it. Maybe Robert Woods, obviously, or Cooper Kupp has a little larger age as a better quarterback and can throw the ball because he has one of the best cannons in the league. But I don't think we're going to see like spectacular numbers from Stafford. Like he's going to be a very efficient quarterback. We've seen him get more efficient over the last couple of years because he's needed to, with the loss of Calvin Johnson or Megatron. he can be efficient, and the Rams don't need him to take chances. They don't need him to be a gunslinger. They're going to be winning most games because of their defense. So
I agree.
I don't know, Lane. What do you think?
I agree 100%. I've got him sitting probably right around, like you said, that QB 12 range. But I think, and you brought this up off the air before we came on, that you think what's going to happen is we're going to see Stafford actually get overvalued in drafts this year because there's going to be all this buzz of, oh my gosh, Stafford's got all these weapons now. But you're right. The Rams won games
People are going to be
last
super
season.
excited. People are already super excited.
They are, and they won games because of their defense. And part of the reason, like you said, that Stafford put up numbers was because they were chasing that game. They were behind, they're trailing, and so he had to air it out and get whatever they could. They're not going to have to do that as much with the Rams. I do think he can continue to improve in terms of his efficiency. He's got even more receiving talent here, and then we can talk about the running back talent as well. Cam Akers, man, they started relying on him a lot towards the end of this season, and he ran like crazy over a number of teams. So when you've got that kind of running back talent, and don't forget about Darrell Henderson as well, he'll be a nice backup for Akers. There's a lot of weapons there, but there's also a lot of reason why Stafford won't have to throw as much. So I think you're right to be a little bit conservative with him. As exciting as it is, as much buzz as this generates, I'm probably going to be letting somebody else pick him up on draft day.
Yeah. I mean, and you're looking at Robert Woods. I mean, he was already a top, 15 receiver this year. So
is he really going to climb that much higher?
Right. Like, what upgrade are we talking now? He's going to be higher than A.J. Brown? Are we taking him higher than Allen Robinson? Justin Jefferson? Like Amari Cooper, who he finished with more points than, but obviously Amari Cooper didn't have a quarterback, and you can argue Robert Woods didn't have a quarterback either. But if he's already scoring, top 15, like, yeah, maybe there's more efficiency in the red zone. Stafford puts him the ball. Maybe his A-dot goes a little further just because, Stafford can. But I don't think there's a huge fantasy implication. I think the Rams jump, obviously, and are contenders to win that division in the real world. But we're not talking real world. We're talking fantasy. And
right.
I don't know. I think Akers obviously can run more efficient, even though he ran very well at the end of the season, as you talked about, Lane. It's just, I think people are going to overvalue. And I mean, I'm looking at quarterbacks. So let me just, okay. Are you taking Ben Roethlisberger or Matthew Stafford?
That might be exactly where you draw the line, right? That might be it. I'm probably leaning Stafford. Because, I'm I guess he's got an injury history too, but that would be a close one for me. That would be a toss-up. Maybe not for you. Do you think that's a clear-cut decision?
I mean, I'm a homer, obviously, but I don't think it's clear-cut, but I would lean Stafford in that just because of the history. I think Roethlisberger is getting a lot older. I mean, he doesn't look that good out there just from the blind eye. He's still putting up 5 points, right? But from the blind, so I'd rather be a year early than a year late getting off of that. He's not as mobile as he used to be. Stafford can still elude, and he's not quick by any means, but he can still get out of the pocket and go. I would lean Stafford, and I think it's clear cut for me. But I'm also a very biased Stafford fan. I think the decision would be more in the line of like Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford. I think like at that's a good tier point, to put him in. You're drawing the line.
Well, for sure, because you also don't put him up, and like you said, he can run if he needs to. But you look at like most of those top 10 guys. Wilson, Lamar, Mahomes, Josh Allen. Those are all guys that are putting up a lot of rushing yards too. A lot of those guys are, right? So with fantasy football, those running quarterbacks, as we know, you're getting a point for every 10 yards, right? So, those guys that can run, those are those guys that are at the top. Obviously Aaron Rodgers runs the ball too. So,
let me throw this
Hurts if he's starting.
Jalen Hurts. Yeah. That was my question. What about Jalen Hurts? If he gets named a starter, where are we going there?
If he's named the starter, I'm still going Hurts mainly because of the running part of it. But I think it could be close. I would take Hurts right now, based on what I saw at the end of the season. I would take Hurts over Stafford, and the main reason is because of the rushing. I think obviously Stafford's a better pocket passer right now and a better overall quarterback. He's got experience, right? But again, like we said, we're not, Lamar Jackson's not a great passer, but he puts up huge fantasy points when he runs the ball, right? So right now I would take Hurts. And I think you guys are probably about right. I think right around that 12 range with Stafford, I guess. And I would also probably pass on him, like Lane said, because I think his hype's going to be too high. Who knows? He might be taking, it's hard to say now, but quarterback 7, 8, 9, just because you're going to get somebody in your league that's going to have that's going to push for him. So, but I think he does have the upside. I mean, I think with McVay, it is interesting. I think you guys are probably right. He's around that borderline QB1, QB2, around that 12. But I think he has the potential to be a quarterback 7 or 8. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. But you do have, it's an interesting thing when you have a guy go to a new team, and you don't know exactly how much that's going to kind of push him to even get a little bit better too. And I like Stafford a lot. He's already a talented quarterback, so it's definitely interesting. But yeah, no, I would take a running quarterback over him though all day.
Does this bump Cam Akers up in your mind to look at the running side of it? Does Cam Akers go up in your rankings out of this because you've got Stafford now? I think he's got to get bumped at least a little bit just because the ability to move the ball down the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think he goes up at least a little. I think Cam Akers was already moving up a lot because of what we saw at the end of the year. You know what I mean? He was already moving up, I'm sure your boards and my board, but I mean, I think it could give him even a little more of a bump just because I think the whole offense gets better. I think, like I said before. So
yeah. So I think that's the question. Like, how much did the last few weeks and into the playoffs did that actually bump Cam Akers up the draft board? And then where's that line? So obviously the offense is going to become more efficient. The offense is going to have a chance to put up more points, and I think they will. Cam Akers will be by the end zone more. We'll have more opportunities to score touchdowns, and obviously touchdowns are the thing that sways fantasy points, right? Because you get those 6 points for those touchdowns, so that can easily jump you. Right. And then you're going to regress to the mean during certain years. So if he was low on touchdowns, he's obviously going to score more this year, or vice versa. So he's just going to have more opportunities than he had with Goff. So I think you obviously have to bump him up like 1 or 2. But when we're talking in this range, like Ezekiel Elliott, like Taylor, Aaron Jones, like DeAndre Swift, I guess you could argue in that range. Like we're in that range, and obviously DeAndre Swift might take, and we can switch to the Lions too and talk. But I like if he jumps up too much more, we're into like the top 5, 6 running
you're buying
backs,
him at a ceiling.
I don't think he's there yet.
That's the issue. There might be a little bit of a jump, and there's a lot of guys on the Rams that we are already pretty high on. So if you bump them up too much more, you're giving yourself no room in there to really get that big hit breakout player because you're buying them at what their ceiling price would be if you're drafting them too early. So that's one of the things to be cautious of is, trades can be great. They can generate a lot of buzz. They're exciting. They're a lot of fun to talk about, but sometimes players get hyped a little bit too much because of it. And then, sometimes we downgrade players too much. DeAndre Hopkins last year, I wasn't that high on him because he got traded, and we've seen receivers struggle in new locations at times. And it turned out he was just fine with the Cardinals. So you never know exactly how it's going to play out. But in general, I try to be a little bit more conservative and let somebody else take that gamble and buy in to that hype and buzz.
Yeah, and I think Cam Akers got the buzz anyways going into so he's going to go where he's going to go. I don't think Stafford's going to push the needle on him. I think people will be looking, McVay's a genius, and they'll be looking at the receiving options. I think Woods gets bumped, Kupp gets bumped, obviously in the draft rankings. We avoid them. The only benefit with Akers could be they could be in more positive game scripts with Stafford being a better quarterback.
Right.
And then obviously running a little bit more, but you still have Darrell Henderson there too, who did look good at points this season. Akers obviously blew up, but correct me if I'm wrong, Henderson was injured, correct?
Yeah, he was a little bit banged up, but you know what I mean.
He was banged up.
The draft. So. I mean, look, there was draft capital spent on Henderson too. There's no question, but
right.
I feel like Akers is the guy. That's the way I'm going to be looking at this going in, is that Henderson's going to be more kind of a change of pace guy for them, and Akers is going to be the man based on what we saw at the end of last season. And if it turns out to be different, if it turns out to be some sort of a timeshare, then Akers is going to wind up getting overdrafted if that isn't clear before we head into draft season. But it's going to be something to watch to see how that all shakes out.
I agree with you. I think Akers is clearly the better running back, but I mean, there's very few workhorse running backs in today's NFL. So if McVay, who by all means plays analytics or looks at analytics, right? He's that guy, right? He's that young phenom of a coach. Like, is he going to run a workhorse running back? He obviously did Akers, but I think Henderson was a little banged up. Brown was just not there. So at the end of the year. So once they're all healthy, or once Henderson's fully healthy, does he go back to a 60-40, 70, 70-30, 65-35?
I think Henderson, they'll still be involved.
Matter.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think McVay figured out, I'm not saying he figured it out, but I think he decided that he had his guy in Akers. I kind of agree with Lane that I think, going to next year, I think Akers is going to be, obviously you're still mixing those guys in. You don't have many just guys that are, 90% of the snaps anymore in the NFL, but I definitely see like Lane said, like Akers as the guy there. And who knows? Could be wrong, but it just the way the season kind of played out toward the end seems like they went that direction. And I understand, Henderson was banged up, but I think Akers proved he can be the guy, and so I think he'll get a chance to do it.
All right, let's jump over to the.
So,
go ahead, finish up there, and then we'll jump over.
Yeah, so one quarterback. Just tying it back to Stafford. I mean, I was throwing out names. I mean, one quarterback, and obviously he's coming off of ACL. He may not even play, but what if Joe Burrow's healthy? I mean, I think there's a range, and I'm not saying he's going to be healthy. I think he's obviously going to miss some time, and he probably should sit out most of the. I mean, just recover. He's got a whole career. He's obviously looked very good, but I think arguably Herbert's ahead of Stafford.
I don't think it's even arguable. I think he's definitely ahead of Herbert. Yeah,
you're right, 100%. You're taking Herbert above Stafford.
Right.
But I think Burrow's an interesting conversation, and I think you got Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. You got the guy from BYU, North Dakota State, those two coming out too that arguably run a little bit and get crazy in the air. So I'm not saying those rookie quarterbacks, but I think Joe Burrow's an interesting one comparing to Stafford.
Yeah,
that'll be one of those interesting decisions to make next year for sure. I mean, those guys are all in that, Brady, Cousins, Burrow, Ryan, even Big Ben. So that's going to be those decisions next year.
I will never take Tom Brady.
No, I hear you. But I think that's that thing next year. Like Lane said, I'm going to let somebody else take Stafford. I'm going to take one of those other guys that's going to be
a couple of rounds
on a weekly basis about the same, right? And I'm going to get them later on.
Exactly.
In the draft.
Exactly.
So,
that's
sorry, Lane. I kind of jumped.
No, I was going to
jump that ship there, but I know we were switching to Detroit.
Yes.
So
we're going to go to your team. But first, I need to remind everybody, make sure, guys, you subscribe right here to the Fantasy Football Teachers YouTube channel. Got to get that in. All right, Ben, do your thing.
Yeah, let's do that before I get all depressed here.
I need to get that in before we take the downturn, before the rain cloud comes in. All right, Ben, let's do this. Let's talk about the Detroit Lions. Oh,
so
okay.
Here we go. So the Lions are not out of taking a quarterback at their pick in the top 10, right? Like, they can get away from Goff in 2 years. So they could technically take a quarterback here. As a Lions fan, I think the Rams won the trade. I think they got the best player, but the draft picks are interesting. And the Lions are now in a situation where they don't have to force to take a quarterback, right? Like, they can wait to find what they think is their player and take it. So they don't have to, but it's not out of the realm that the Lions take a quarterback this season, which could obviously put Goff even lower than he is. So I think Goff, you're not taking him in fantasy purposes. Even 2 QB leagues, I think you should just stay away. He doesn't seem like a person that's going to bite off kneecaps, so I don't think Dan Campbell is going to be super thrilled with him. I think DeAndre Swift is obviously interesting, but they're going to be in a negative game script. But Dan Campbell in his press conference mentioned something about Swift's, getting into the slot a little bit more. So that's interesting fantasy-wise. The Lions don't have any receivers right now. They have Quintez Cephas. Marvin Jones is a free agent. Galladay's a free agent. So arguably they could franchise tag Kenny Galladay, but what's the point of it? Like, we're not competing for a playoff. Like, why are we wasting that money? Like, let Kenny Galladay walk. Like, we're not competing for 2 or 3 years, like, at the earliest. So just let Kenny Galladay walk. He's not going to re-sign with us anyway. So let him go to wherever he needs to go. And let's just run DeAndre Swift, drop it off. I mean, I think Hawkinson could be interesting. I think he takes kind of a bump, but he's already like in the top 5 tight ends that you're drafting, maybe top 7. But I mean, he's up there. So what? He's not jumping over Waller. He's not jumping over Kelsey. Right. So what jump is he really taking? And you're getting a less efficient quarterback. So it's not good fantasy wise for Detroit. It's not good to be watching it every Sunday now.
Hawk's not jumping over them. I don't think in the rankings,
No.
like you said, but I think he is interesting, like you said. Like just because he stays in that 5 to 7 range, maybe he still closes the gap. I mean, he's not going to be anything like Kelsey or Waller,
Right.
but maybe he closes the gap a little bit because you always wonder with those quarterbacks that struggle a little bit. They tend to lean on the tight end a little bit as that safety valve. So and Goff doesn't throw the ball deep. So
I don't think you're being turned off of Hawk, right? Like
No,
this
no,
isn't
absolutely
this
not.
isn't a situation where Hawk gets better, and I don't think this is a situation where Hawk gets worse. Like
Right.
it is what it is. He's not Travis Kelsey. He's not Darren Waller. Okay,
But at the position, if he
by
can
all
just be
means.
dependable week in and week out, that's a home run, right? Like
Then
that,
you
just
win.
finding a tight end
Right.
who you know is
So-
going to get targets every single week. That was maddening trying to find somebody to do that last season if you didn't have
Tight
Kelsey
end
or you didn't
position
have
sucks.
Waller. So
Right.
if Hawkinson can just be that consistent target for Goff, and maybe he's the third or fourth tight end, that's a very draftable player.
Oh yeah, I think he's 100% draftable. I don't think Goff hurts his value by any means. I think Hawk is the one player that you can just argue his value stays consistent. I think DeAndre Swift, his role is really just going to be. You just have to see what his role is going to be. If he's really getting pushed into the slot a lot, I think that's very beneficial for him fantasy wise, right? Like he's going to get, but he also needs those runs. We saw him get some goal line runs this year with Stafford. So does Campbell give him those? Does Anthony Lynn, who's the new offensive coordinator, yay, just want to run the ball 100 times? Because
God, you are excited about next season.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's gonna be
he's
fun
ready
to
to
watch.
go.
It's gonna be fun to
For
listen
the
to next year.
Listen, yeah, yep.
No, I think.
Lane, what do you think? I mean, I was carrying that conversation. Obviously, I'm very biased when it comes to the Lions. I don't think this whole draft thing is bad for them. Like, I think Stafford wanted out. This is just the great organization where Megatron, Sanders, Stafford all want out of town. At least we didn't make Stafford retire. And I think we did him well. I think the reports show that he wanted to go to, Los Angeles. So, we did him well there. But, man,
Yeah.
I was carrying this conversation, like, what do you think? I'm just like, I don't think they have fantasy outlook. I think Swift stays the same. I think Hawk stays the same. Maybe they get a receiver that's like a low A dot receiver that you can take late in like the 10th, 11th round. But other than that, I think you just stay
No,
away.
I agree. I agree 100% because here's the thing. Like, I don't think, I mean, it depends on what they do here because we don't know. Like, if they lose Galladay, if they lose Marvin Jones, are they really rolling into the season with Quintez Cephas as the guy, as their wide receiver one? Is that going to be their option, their main target? Maybe, but I doubt it. I think there's going to be something else coming in here, and so we kind of have to wait to see how this goes in terms of who.
Right,
Well,
they have to get
there
somebody.
has to be
Somebody
someone
has
to
to catch
throw
the
the
ball.
ball to. As much as you say, hey, it's just a rebuilding, and I don't want to use that T word tank, but I mean that's kind of what we're talking about here. So there's somebody else coming in. I think that can change things a little bit. But you're right. Of the guys that are known commodities in Detroit, I don't think a whole lot changes. Maybe you're relying on Swift a little bit more because Goff doesn't have the arm talent that Stafford does. So you can make an argument there. But Hawkinson, I think, stays about the same. So I don't think a whole lot changes. And I'm not taking Jared Goff with no one to throw to on my fantasy team. I mean, I'm serious. He's not even in my top two rounds of quarterback. He's not even QB 24 for me. He is going all the way down, almost to the bottom of the list. He's, in my mind, he's not even draftable.
So let me throw this scenario out there. I haven't heard this talked about or seen on Twitter really. The Lions with Stafford were horrible. Their defense was one of the worst defenses in the league. That's not going to change, right? Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So Jared Goff's obviously going to be in a negative game script most of the season. Regardless of who he throws to, he's going to be in a negative game script most of the season. So if you're in a negative game script as quarterback, you're going to be throwing the ball more unless Anthony Lynn, who's horrible, just wants to run the ball. But let's just say Anthony Lynn has like a come to Jesus moment and realizes like he should pass the ball because we're in a negative game script.
Or does he turn DeAndre Swift into Austin Eckler?
Right. So that, but I'm looking at Goff here in my scenario. So the new GM for the Lions was with the Rams when they took Jared Goff. And some reports are saying like he was the one that really wanted Jared Goff. with the report. So if he's a Goff believer, maybe he sees something. And Goff did win playoff games, right? Like he took the Rams to the Super Bowl. Does that change? Like, what if Goff is the Goff that we saw go to the Super Bowl?
In Goff, we trust.
What if Goff
isn't
isn't efficient? Listen. This is not what I think. This is not what I believe. I'm just throwing this scenario. They're in a negative game script. They're going to be throwing the ball. Prevent defenses, right? Like they're up, they're just preventing, they're just holding down. Goff is going to be chucking up some yards, getting those low A dots, being very efficient passer, driving down, possibly into the end zone. Like, does that push him into like the, streaming quarterback viable, like those 2 QB leagues? Like, does that push him into those where like, hey, he might end up being the 18th, 19th quarterback, which is viable in a 2 QB league? Like, and that, I mean, he's going to be in negative game scripts. We agreed on that.
Mm-hmm. Right. He has shown he can play a little bit in the past, right? He has been terrible lately. But I mean, you do have a point there. I mean, if they're behind, and I do think when you said about our defense is not getting better, I mean, I think it can't get much worse. I think with Dan Campbell there, their defense gets a little better. I'm not saying anytime soon, though. We're talking about next year. So is there going to be a huge difference next year just because he comes in with that tougher mindset? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I'm still avoiding him just because I don't think you're drafting him. I guess in a 2 QB league, I guess you could draft him as like a third quarterback. I mean, I don't know. I mean, in a typical league, though, I think you just leave him off the board. And then I guess if he does start playing well, then you can maybe grab him as a waiver pick if you have priority. But it depends on your league. If you have a super deep bench and you want to take a chance on him, but I mean, anybody that's in like a typical league with 5 to 7 bench spots, I wouldn't recommend, using a roster spot on what would probably be the third quarterback on your roster. I mean, I guess maybe you take him as your second quarterback, but that's pretty risky because if he's not good and your main guy gets hurt, you're in a lot of trouble. So I don't know. I'm still
okay,
but
what about so Daniel Jones or Jared Goff?
I mean, I think Jones has the ability to run.
The running.
Yeah. Again, we go back to that, and I just think Jones is a little better at this point. But yeah, I mean, I'm big on I know there's different strategy. I oftentimes don't have even a backup quarterback on my roster, depending on the size of the league and all that. But I definitely don't want 3 quarterbacks on my roster.
No, so I think for 1 QB leagues, like Jared Goff is not draftable. I'm thinking like if you're in a 2 QB league, like you're obviously taking 3 quarterbacks because you obviously need those bye week fill-ins. But so he's going to be that bye week fill-in on the 2 QB leagues. But could he be a starter in 2 QB leagues? Is kind of my question. I don't think he is.
No, I don't think so.
I think you can. I think you could argue he is. Like there's some quarterbacks that I think he just is just naturally going to be better than. Like what if his thumbs get? I mean, I don't believe any of this. I'm just throwing out a scenario, because I don't think anybody has talked about it. But people on Twitter, and I said this, people are arguing that Goff is just as good as Stafford, and I think that's just a huge fallacy.
I mean, people also think the Earth is flat.
Let's just say that comes.
I mean,
they do.
I mean, but no, like I think we agree that Goff is not as good as Stafford is. But here's the thing. So what I'm doing with Goff is I'm not drafting him, right? But just like any other, if you're in a 2 QB league, yes, he probably gets drafted, right? Because in a 2 QB league, every QB is going to be taken. But I'm keeping my eye on him. That's it. Like maybe he's in that Daniel Jones tier or whatever, where if you decide you're streaming QB and you get the right matchup and Goff shows in the first couple of games in the season that maybe there's something there, that maybe he's a little bit better than what we thought, then maybe he's a streaming option. But for me, that's the ceiling. I'm not drafting the guy where the ceiling is, hey, maybe in the right week I can use him as a streaming option. At least that's what we've got going in. If he proves me wrong, great. Maybe he goes into Detroit and he's fired up and he's angry that he got traded and he wants to go out there and show the world that he's better. Wonderful. But I want to see that before I would commit to ever actually drafting him.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think he's barely a streamable option in 1 QB leagues at this point. All right, so let's say the Lions franchise Golladay or sign him. Mm-hmm. What is Goff's signing or trade, I guess, due to Golladay? And I do want to point out that obviously we are talking about this on Sunday, and Goff Stafford news just came out. Just came
yesterday.
Yeah.
So here's my thing, right? With Golladay, I don't know if it changes his ranking that much because you think about how much last season Golladay was out, how much he missed. I think because he was out of sight, out of mind for such well, I mean, Fisher, you know this. He was gone for so long last season that people are going to be dropping him down their draft boards just because they haven't seen him in so long. So I still think he could be a bargain. No, I don't think his ceiling is as high with Goff throwing him the ball as with Stafford, but I think he's going to slip in drafts to the point where you have to start wondering, does the talent level, which is very high with Golladay, does the talent win out at some point? I'm not saying that I'm taking him as my wide receiver 1 or anything like that, but he is interesting as a wide receiver 2, just because, like you mentioned, they're going to be down a lot. They're going to have to throw a lot. And Golladay is a very, very talented receiver that I think is going to drop. If you can get him towards the end of that wide receiver 2 tier, I think it's interesting. I think you got to start taking a real look at him at that point.
So we talked a little bit about, on the Rams side, the hype, right? Mm-hmm. The hype of Woods, the hype of Stafford, the hype of Kupp, the hype of everybody on the Rams team. Probably going into, August, September when you're doing your draft. I think the opposite's going to happen in Detroit, right? We're going to see a huge negative hype per se and a huge downgrade. Like you said, Lane, we haven't seen Golladay play forever. We saw him with Stafford though too. So there's going to be that natural inclination that's thinking like, oh, Goff is worse. Golladay has to be worse. If you can get him as that wide receiver 3, I think that upside, low end wide receiver 2 is very hesitant. But if you can get him that low, like mid wide receiver 3, the upside's there. Mm-hmm. The kid's a baller and can go get those balls, and he can run those short routes too and be open and body up the cornerback and get the ball from Goff. So I think you should be targeting Golladay if at the right point in the draft. Like if you want to take him as a wide, like top 24, I think that's pushing. But if you want to take like top 35, I think he has upside to be into the top 20.
Yeah, he's just a guy that I would start considering if I'm getting around, the 22nd, 23rd, right at the end of that wide receiver 2 tier. Yeah. He's a guy that at least is popping up on my radar to where I'm thinking about it when the draft swings to me. But otherwise, yeah, if you can get him as your wide receiver 3, I think that's the sweet spot. Because of the upside. Might not pay off, but I think the upside is there, like you said.
They got to throw the ball. I mean, like you guys, like if he's there and he's like one of their only options besides like Hawkinson or Cephas or whatever, but they're gonna have to throw the ball, like you said, regardless of if Campbell wants to or not, or Lynn wants to. I mean, when you're behind, you have to throw the ball. So I mean, if he's there, you're right. He's interesting because Goff's not going to just complete 5 or 6 passes a game. You have to throw the ball. Like those balls are going somewhere. And if Galladay's there, the talent level, they're going to throw the ball to him. Now, is the defense targeting him more if he's their main guy? You can go into all that, but that's why you're not putting him too high either. But I think he's definitely interesting. The talent is there. And I think, if you can get him around that 24 range, I think what you guys are talking is about right. I think the upside, he's one of those guys you're not taking too early, but if you take him and he outperforms his draft, position by 7-8 picks, who knows? Maybe he does. Then you got a decent steal right there. So,
yep. All right. Well, I think that's a pretty good spot to put a pin in it. Breaking down this whole trade, the Rams and the Lions pulling off a pretty big deal, and now we're going to see Matthew Stafford in LA. We're going to see Ben Fisher in blue and gold now, wearing Rams colors, ready for that. The Lions getting...
I will say, before this podcast, I did look. So Stafford jerseys are obviously not available yet in Rams because it's not official until the league season starts in March. So technically both teams could back out at any time, but those jerseys are not available yet. I will not wear one. My wife, who's a huge Stafford fan, might own a Rams Stafford jersey at some point. But as I said, we will be rooting for him, other than the one game where he plays the Lions next season.
There you go. Next thing, it's going to be a general, a slow process. Before you know it, next year, you're going to be wearing that blue and gold, I think, there, Fisher. All right, guys.
If he gets in the playoffs, I'll get a jersey.
All right.
Let's do it.
We're going to hold you to that. We're going to make you come on this show wearing it, too. We're going to have to make sure that we do that. All right, guys. good stuff. Way to break down this trade. Jared Goff going to the Lions, Matthew Stafford coming to the LA Rams. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Make sure you do subscribe right here. Fantasy Football Teachers, keeping you in the know as we get closer and closer to next fantasy season. Never too early to start preparing. Till then, see ya and stay safe.
See you guys.
Bye all.